Excellencies, honorable parliamentarians, ladies and gentlemen, let me start by really apologizing for not being present in person for this very important event. I was struck this week by the desperation coming from the small island developing states. The Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, said 1.5 to stay alive. She warned that 2 degrees would be a death sentence for island states and many coastal communities. We are now very close to that defining marker of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Extreme weather events have doubled in the last 20 years. Last year alone, they displaced a record 30 million people. The Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, adopted by UN member states in 2015, recognizes the systemic nature of disaster risk and the interplay of other risk drivers with climate change, weak governance, under-resourced disaster management agencies, poverty, the mass destruction of protective ecosystems, poor land use, and the threat of epidemics and pandemics. 120 member states have now developed strategies for disaster risk reduction which address climate-related disaster risks, but only 27 of the 46 least developed countries have these strategies. This indicates that they need more support to strengthen their governance and institutions and to build their capacities. Excellencies, the business case for prevention is clear. Every dollar invested in risk prevention can save up to $15 in post-disaster recovery. Parliamentarians have a central role to play. You can work towards passing the needed legislation and translate our international commitments into country-level actions. At the UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction, we work closely with parliamentarians through our cooperation with the Inter-Parliamentary Union. Together, we focus on how parliamentarians can build a more resilient future for humanity. Working with the IPU, we just published a toolkit for parliamentarians. It highlights 10 actions you can take to influence and implement disaster risk reduction policy adapted to each country's own context. I encourage you to pick up this toolkit, please, and read through the recommendations. Excellencies, COVID-19 pandemic has clearly shown us the systemic nature of risk and that managing systemic risk requires a systems approach. UNDRR advocates for strong and comprehensive risk governance that builds on the interconnected elements of climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. At COP26, UNDRR is issuing the following calls to action. 1. Let's raise ambition for reducing and managing climate change risks. A 50-50 share is needed between adaptation and mitigation in the promised but delayed $100 billion for climate-vulnerable developing countries. Let's significantly increase support for averting, minimizing, and addressing loss and damage. The full spectrum of risk should be addressed, including risks from both extreme and slow onset events triggered by climate change, as well as other natural and man-made hazards. 3. Let's accelerate predictable and risk-informed investment and financing. All climate and development investment and financing should be predictable and risk-informed to better respond to longer-term planning needs. Finally, we urge parliamentarians to ensure that countries take full advantage of opportunities for a green post-COVID-19 recovery. While the pandemic exacerbated existing vulnerabilities and inequalities, it also reaffirmed the importance of an inclusive, equitable, and sustainable development path. With your active leadership, we can build back better for a greener future. I hope to see a strong focus on prevention in the forthcoming Glasgow Accord. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mami.